Is everyone here that's supposed to be?
Yes, everyone's here. Charles is on.
Okay. All right, in that case, then this meeting of the Richmond Rec Board will be called to order, and it is 5 p.m.
Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining the February 15th, 2023 regular meeting of the Richmond Rent Board. I'm going to go over a few reminders to the public before we begin. Members of the public were asked to submit requests to speak on any item on the agenda, including their name, phone number, and item for which they wish to make a public comment to Cynthia_Shaw at ci.richmond.ca.us by 3 p.m. today, as described on the first page of the agenda. If you wish to make a comment on any item on the agenda and have not emailed me your requests, you must do so in accordance with the first page of the agenda before the item is called. Requests received via email during the meeting and after the deadline to submit comments will be accommodated as is reasonably possible and will be limited to a maximum of 1 to 2 minutes, depending on the number of commenters as more fully described in the Rent Board meeting agenda procedures. This meeting is being conducted as a Zoom webinar. Members of the public are considered attendees and will be muted for the duration of the meeting unless called upon during public comment and unmuted by the webinar host. The city cannot guarantee that its network and/or the site will be uninterrupted. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and all statements made during this webinar will be on the public record. The first item on the agenda is pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag
United States of
United
America,
States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice
liberty and
for all.
justice for all.
The next item on the agenda is a roll call. For the purpose of the recording, may I please get an audible roll call from Rent Board members and staff? Board Member Connor,
Present.
Board Member Johnson,
Present.
Board Member Vasilis,
Present.
Vice Chair Mashek,
Present.
Chair Finley,
present.
Executive Director Nicholas Traylor,
Present.
Deputy Director Fred Tran,
Present.
General Counsel Charles Oshanuga.
Sorry, I'm here.
Staff Attorney Palomar Sanchez.
I'm here.
For the record, all Rent Board members and staff are present. The next item on the agenda is statement of conflict of interest. Are there any? Okay, hearing none. The next item on the agenda is agenda review. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Any changes by the staff to the agenda?
No changes.
Thank you. Any changes by board members to the agenda? Please proceed.
Okay, hearing none. The next item on the agenda is public forum. Tonight, we have one speaker. The speaker shall be allowed up to 2 minutes to address the board. When your name is called, please wait until the webinar host lets you know that you have been unmuted. For the record, please state your name and your residence is optional. Please terminate your address to the board when your time expires. We ask that you keep your comments respectful and appropriate. We only have one speaker and it's Cordell Hindler. I'll share my screen real quick.
Yes, can you hear me, Cynthia?
1 second, let me start the timer, okay? 1 second. Sorry about that, Cordell. Let me share my screen. Okay, you can go ahead. Cordell?
Okay, yes, can you hear my voice?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so good evening, Chair Finley, board members. My name is Cordell Hendler and I have 2 things to say. So number 1, you are cordially invited to attend the Contra Costa Mayor's Conference on March 2nd at 6:30 p.m. at the Orinda Country Club. And the tickets are only $55 a person. So, but you have to RSVP by February 21st in 6 days from now. So that's 1. And then number 2, you recall at the last meeting, where I made my comments regarding to having the meetings go back in person, let me reiterate my comments. So the reason I brought this item is because I had looked at other jurisdictions, and they've been doing hybrid meetings for some time. I think that it's time that the boards and commissions can come back in person. So I'm hoping that that the board will consider doing like a hybrid format, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, that was the last speaker and the only speaker. Okay, the next item on the agenda is to approve the consent calendar.
Any objections? Any changes?
Chair Finley, I had a question about the matrix contract, which is item F5. It might
Yes,
be a simple question, but I think I need to ask that it be moved from the consent calendar to, maybe we can hear it right before G,
yes, that would make sense.
please and thank you.
Okay, so
that-
we're, okay. go
In
ahead.
that case, we're going to need a motion to accept this change.
I move that we move item F5 from the consent calendar to be heard right before the matter entitled G on our agenda.
G1, very good. May I have a second, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Vasilis. May we have a vote?
Board Member Connor,
Yes.
Board Member Johnson,
Yes.
Board Member Vassilos,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mishek,
Yes.
and Chair Finley.
Yes,
Motion passes to move item F5 from consent calendar to be heard before item G1. All right, so now we're going to approve what about the other items on the consent calendar?
I move that we approve the remaining items on the consent calendar.
Okay,
thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
May we have a vote?
Board Member Connor,
Yes.
Board Member Johnson,
Yes.
Board Member Vassilos,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mishek,
Yes.
and Chair Finley.
Yes, and just to be clear, what we have accepted as the consent calendar are items F1, F2, F3, and F4.
Yes, motion passes to accept the consent calendar for items F1, F2, F3, F4.
Thank you.
Mhm. The next item on the agenda is item F5.
Yes,
Item F5 is to approve a contract in the amount of $17,290 with Matrix Consulting Group to develop a cost allocation plan and to direct staff from the Finance Department and Rent Program to prepare the full cost allocation plans that adheres to both the Government Code, Section 50076, and Richmond Municipal Code, Sections 11.100.060I, for a term beginning January 18th, 2023 through January 17th, 2025. This contract was approved by the City Council at the January 24th, 2023 regular City Council meeting on consent item O.1.A. There are no speakers on this item.
thank you. Mr. Traylor, did you want to discuss item F5 with the board?
Well, we're happy to answer any questions from board members. Board member Bryce Connor
Okay,
clearly has a question she'd like to ask, and we're
Ms. Connor.
I love you, Mr. Traylor. I do. I actually just had a question for Mr. Oshanuga. I noticed, I didn't read the contract, I have to confess, all 13 pages of it. I kind of just skimmed it. But on paragraph 8, on page 4, it talks about changes in extra work. And it authorizes the city council or city manager to authorize extra work. but it doesn't articulate who's gonna pay for that. Is there some addendum or understanding around a consultation with us before they spend any more money?
It's it. Can you give me the page again? Sorry.
Yeah, page 4. It's paragraph 8, and it's called changes and extra work.
All right, give me 1 sec. I'm just trying to scroll down. And is that
Yeah.
from Exhibit B?
It is from
Oh, okay, I got it. It's right here.
attachment 2, I think.
Oh, yeah, okay, I see. Yeah, so I mean, this is honestly boilerplate language that didn't get altered to accommodate for the fact that we are also part of this contract. I would imagine that the city would pay for any additional changes in work it itself wanted. However, this contract does not say that we would pay, or the city would pay it full, or we would be expected to pay half of it. So that's definitely unclear from the contract. But given our continuous discussions with the city, I would be personally, I'd be shocked if they try to unilaterally ask for additional work and then charge and then expect us to pay for half of that. My understanding is all the decisions that are going to be made with this contractor is going to take both the rent program and the city to agree on those decisions.
Right. I would prefer that it be articulated, just because, you know, we weren't expecting that cost allocation number to jump up the way it did. Not that I don't trust them, just asking.
Board Member Grice Connor, and let me also mention, we have representatives from the city manager's office and the finance department, Deputy City Manager Nikki Meste, and from finance Mubin Cutter. So they can also
Excellent.
your questions.
Excellent. I'd appreciate some feedback on that.
This is sort of the boilerplate language that we do have, but we will work collaboratively with the rent board and with Nicholas if there's anything that needs any changes. We're not expecting that anything, because this is a full cost recovery plan. Also, what you're seeing in like jump in costs, in particular on the insurance end, about a couple of years ago, it became very difficult for the state of California in general to find underwriters to underwrite any insurance policies statewide. So during that time, I was in a prior agency. The full cost workers' comp, general liability, employee health, et cetera, not like the health insurance, but like EAP, it went from about 4 million, and in 2 years it went to almost $7 million. Because if you can't find someone to underwrite the insurance, they're just going to ratchet up the rates because of the risk. And that's when we were having all the fires and everything just happening all at once. So in the land of workers' compensation, that shot up, general liability shot up, EAP just shot up, the cost just ratchet. And at that time, I was with the city that was actually part of a pooling authority. And we were seeing that effect as a pool. The city of Richmond isn't in a pool. We are a standalone and we are self-funded. We are not fully insured. So we have, when we get to our deductible, which is fairly high, we then have to pay a premium for the excess insurance. So that's why we're doing a full cost allocation to see what the effects may be on what we have now and what might be in the future.
Appreciate that. It
excuse-
doesn't actually respond directly to my question, which was when there are changes under this contract, is the rent program going to be consulted, and is that going to be specifically added to the contract to reflect that we're sharing in the cost? I just want it to be clear so that down the road there's no confusion.
It would depend on the changes that the city would want. But this is a full cost allocation plan, so everything should be included right now. I don't foresee us adding anything else.
And of course-
However, if I may add, this is Mubin Kader, the budget administrator. the development of this specific contract and the staff report and everything has been in, consultation with the rent board's staff participation. So we do not expect to make any change or any initiative without the rent staff's consultation. So the selection of the vendor, RFP, staff report, everything has been, even the contract has been through collaboration with the rent board. This specific contract is the collaboration between rent board and the city of Richmond. So there won't be any additional work initiated without the rent board's agreement. And also, like, this probably is the language is standard contract language, which we have in all of the city contracts. Does that answer your question?
I understand that it's standard. I just wanted to be absolutely sure that there's no question down the road when a change is initiated that's outside the scope of what's already been articulated, that the city is not going to unilaterally make a decision and then anticipate that the rent board is going to contribute half. And I just don't see that anywhere in the standard contract. And I understand this is standard, but this is also not something that, this is not a contract that the rent board is going to be using over and over again. So I just wanted to be crystal clear who's responsible for what and who's going to be paying for what. And specifically, it just had to do with the changes because it appears from the written contract that the city will make that decision unilaterally.
Just two statements. First of all, Mr. Traylor, would you be good enough to introduce the two new members that we're talking to today? I'm kind of in the dark. I don't know where they come from and who they are, and I'd like to say thank you for being here. Mr. Traylor.
Yes, Nikki Meste is Deputy City Manager with the City Manager's Office, and Mubin Qadir is with the Finance Department. He's the Budget Administrator. So we've been, Fred and I have been working very closely.
I kind of have a different take on this, Alana, and you're the attorney, you're far more knowledgeable than I, but there is a limitation to the amount of money that we are expected to pay. And I would think that if there was some sort of a change, although I share your concerns about unilateral action, that they could not make us liable to pay for something if we were not consulted at that time and agreed to it. That I want to say is it's clear here, but the city council did approve this contract. And so if we were to add a change to it now, we'd have to go, I don't think all the way back to the beginning, but we would certainly have to start part of the process over again. And this is a contract that has, it's very late in getting to us to achieve what we want it to get done. So just as a point of reference to throw on the table.
And Chair Finley, if I may, just real briefly,
Surely.
just add something that might alleviate some of the concerns is that this particular clause in the contract, its purpose isn't really to give the city more power to authorize extra payment. It's to protect the city from additional fees when a contractor works outside of the scope of the authorized work, right? And so it's really saying, I don't care if you do extra work beyond what you're authorized to do, you're not going to get paid unless we first approve of the extra work that you're doing. And so I think looking at it from that perspective, it's to stop our costs from increasing. And what I heard from the city manager's office and from the finance department just right now is a commitment that there will be no decisions that are unilateral from the city, that they will first seek rent board approval if it's something that is outside the scope of the contract.
That's correct.
I have to apologize. I've been, I can no longer hear anything. And it's just started.
Virginia,
Is
can you hear
everyone
me?
else?
Can you hear me?
Huh?
Can-
Yes,
okay,
now
you
I
hear me.
can. Thank you.
So we all kind of went quiet for a minute. It wasn't.
Okay,
just-
I didn't, sometimes it's just my computer, so I never quite know. Okay,
Okay, we all got quiet. So I guess
All right.
waiting on someone to speak.
all right. So Ms. Connor, are you satisfied with this at this point then?
Efficiently.
Okay. Are there any further comments? Any other questions from members? Mr. Trailer, did you wish to say anything further? Mr.
I just wanna-
Oshanuga?
Thank you, Chair Finley. I just want to remind the board that time is of essence in this case, because the cost pool allocation study does impact our budget and our ability to properly budget for
Mhm.
cost pool. So the longer, if we were to delay this any further, it would potentially impair
Okay,
our abilities.
all righty. I'm going to need a motion.
I move that we approve item F1. F5, sorry. Thanks.
I'm sorry. Help me with the motion, folks.
Carol, okay, Vice Chair Mashek first, made a motion first. And then I just heard Board Member Johnson say second.
All right. May we have a vote, please?
Sure. Board Member Connor,
Yes.
Board Member Johnson,
Yes.
Board Member Vasilis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mashek,
Yes.
and Chair Finley. Chair Finley? Can you hear me? Chair Finley? Chair Finley? Chair Finley?
I think there's.
Yes.
Okay. Do you accept? Yes? You approve?
Yes.
Yes, I was taking a vote at the time when you went. Okay. Uh-oh, she's frozen. Can you hear
Yes.
me now? Okay, yes, got you. Okay, okay, everyone, I'm sorry, I lost track. Item F5 to, item F5 passed unanimously.
And
Thank
thank you. And thank you to city staff for attending the meeting for questions.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, now we're moving on to item G1 under regulations. Item G1 is to amend Regulation 600 and Regulation 610 and adopt Regulation 611, as these changes are necessary to bring Chapter 6 of Rent Board Regulations in alignment with Measure P. There are no speakers on this item.
All right. Good evening, members of the board and Chair Finley. My name is Palomar Sanchez.
Yes.
Oh, can you hear me?
Now I can.
Okay, great. My name is Palomar Sanchez. I'm a staff attorney for the rent program. And this is the presentation regarding the amendments to Regulation 600, 610, and the addition of Regulation 611 pursuant to Measure P. Next slide, please. All right, so the statement of the issue. So Richmond voters passed Measure P on the November 8th, 2022 ballot by 56%. This measure amended our existing ordinance and the provisions of the municipal code. And so what it did is it increased the limitation for regulated units from 100% of inflation to 60% of inflation as measured by the Consumer Price Index, or a flat 3%, whichever is less. And so the passage of this measure means that we have to amend some of the Chapter 6 regulations. And so staff has amended 2 regulations and added one to in order to be consistent with the voter initiative, Measure P, entitled the Richmond Annual Allowable Rental Adjustment Ordinance. Next slide, please. There's no fiscal impact of receiving this report. Next slide. All right, so just a little bit of background. So in Richmond, certain residential units, their rental rates are controlled by the Fair Rent Just Cause for Eviction and Homeowner Protection Ordinance. And so as this was originally written and adopted by the Richmond voters in 2016, landlords were entitled to an annual rental increase equivalent to 100% of the consumer price index for the San Francisco Oakland Bay area. Now, prior to the passage of Measure P, the annual general adjustment for 2022 was 5.2%. Next slide, please. All right. So now we can explain a little bit as to what Measure P does. So first of all, Measure P became effective 10 days after the vote was declared by the City Council. And at their regular meeting on December 20th, they declared the vote. And so therefore it became effective December 30th, 2022. Now, really what it does is it caps rent increases for controlled units at either 3% or 60% of the local CPI, whichever is lower. It also requires landlords to decrease the rent to the amount that it was on August 31st, 2022, plus 3%. So, and failure to lower the rent on the effective date of Measure P would likely result in a rent overcharge. And finally, Measure P has a phase-in period, which extends from the effective date of Measure P, again, December 30th, 2022, through August 31st, 2020, excuse me, December 30th, 2022 through August 31st, 2023. That's the phase-in period. So during this period, no tenant's rent may be more than what it was on August 31st, 2022, plus 3%. Next slide, please. All right, so the amendments to the regulations 600 and 610. So first is regulation 600. So again, currently the annual general adjustment shall equal 100%. Under this regulation, that's what it says, 100% of the increase of the consumer price index. But again, Measure P changed this AGA calculation to 60% of CPI or 3%, whichever is lower. So therefore, staff is proposing amending Regulation 600 by removing the quote 100%, adding 60%, and by adding or 3%, whichever is lower. For Regulation 610, again, this is the regulation which was passed last year, which provided the annual general adjustment order for 2022 and saying it was 5.2%. Now, again, not to repeat myself, but Measure P has changed that, and the AGA for 2022, moving forward through August 31st, 2023, is now 3%. And so this regulation must be declared ineffective as of December 30th, and to allow also for the newly added Regulation 611 to take effect. Further, we have identified some typos in this regulation, Regulation 610. So specifically the year, it says 2021 to like 2020, and then a 2 at the end. And in the lettering of the subsections of the regulation where it says D, E, and F, it actually should be A, B, and C. And so staff is proposing amending Regulation 610 by declaring the ineffective date of the regulation and the previous AGA 5.2% as of December 30th, 2022, and by rectifying the identified typos. Next slide, please. And so finally, the addition of Regulation 611, that brings us to, what we really need to add in to change this percentage, to explain that the new AGA order for 2022 through August 31st, 2023 is 3%. And then finally, because we have banking regulations and read in conjunction with the measure, which says that it can't be more than August 31st, it can't be more than what the rent was on August 31st, 2022, plus 3%. That brings a conflict, because generally landlords may think that they'd be able to bank currently, which they're not able to do. So we have to clarify that banking is not allowed during this phase-in period. And then as a consequence, we must also define what that period is. And so to resolve these issues, staff is proposing the addition of Regulation 611 to Chapter 6 of the Rent Board regulations. Next slide, please. And finally, the recommended action is that the board amend Regulation 600 and Regulation 610 and adopt Regulation 611, as these changes are necessary to bring Chapter 6 of the Rent Board regulations in alignment with Measure P. And I think that's it. Staff can filter any questions should there be any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Any questions from board members for Mr. Sanchez or anyone else?
I have a question.
Oh, wait a minute, I'm having problems. Do I see any hands? I'm not
No,
seeing them.
it was no hands, but Board Member Connor has a question.
Miss Connor.
Thank you. I'm trying to understand the revision to 610B. And I know you've explained it twice already, and I read it and I still don't quite get it. So I know I'm missing something.
Sure.
If the 5.2%, that AGA is basically being wiped out.
Yes.
So subsection B says that the 3% AGA is effective as of September 1st, 2022. So that if an owner is going to do banking at some future point, they're going to be relying on this 3%. But then it says it becomes ineffective on December 30th. Won't the AGA still be the same until a new AGA number is calculated, which will be later later this year?
So the calculation for the AGA, at least for this phase-in period, is not going to be based on CPI or anything else. It's a flat 3%, and that's just the express language in the in the measure. And so, you know, the 3% really comes directly from the ordinance, and just makes it clear that during this like initial period after the passage of the ordinance in December through, you know, August 31st, that it's just going to stay at 3%. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
So do we need the parenthetical phrase "and shall become ineffective on December 30th"? I guess I'm just not understanding why we need to reference that date in the regulation.
Well,
It's going to be 3% beginning September 1st of 2020, and it's not going to be reset until August 31st of August 31st of 2023. Why are we referencing December 30?
so I believe that's because that's the effective date of the measure, right? And so that the effective date is when the previous AGA under that regulation became ineffective, because that's when Measure P was declared effective, which essentially, you know, took away the 5.2%.
Okay, so the 3% shall be effective September 1, 2022, and shall become ineffective on December 30, 2022?
Where are you looking at? I'm sorry.
610B.
Okay.
I'm just trying to read it for clarity, and maybe, as I said, I may be confusing other people in my reading, but I'm trying to understand what it's saying.
I have to bring up the actual regulation. I don't have that.
Fred, can you pull up the red line version, please?
Actually, Fred, it might be easier if you pull up the clean version.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah, just scroll all the way down, Fred. No, that's it. That's the wrong item. You got to get the item G. You have F5. Go to the clean version, Fred.
Going, it's attachment 2.
Keep going. Yep.
There you go.
There you go. A little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay. Right up, right there. Okay, so you're talking about this part. It says the annual adjustment granted by this regulation shall become effective on September 1, 2022, and shall become effective on December 30th, 2022, as indicated in Regulation 611. Is that what you're talking about? Right. Charles, I'm not sure if you want to take this one to better, you may be able to better explain it.
Fred, can you scroll up a little bit more so we can see the whole thing? There you go. Sure. I thought you. answered it, but I think this regulation, as it says, this is the regulation that authorized the 2022 AGA, and it's 5.2%. And B simply says that the 5.2% was authorized on September 1st, 2022, and that same percentage, 5.2, it's going to become ineffective on December 30th, 2022. And as Mr. Sanchez stated, it's ineffective because it's being replaced by that 3%. And the purpose of having that timeline is just to assure, we got a lot of comments from some landlords and some landlord attorneys concerned that if they were to take the 5.2% during that window, September 1st and December 30th, that they may be liable for a rent rollback for tenants who are eligible for 3%. And after looking at the law and researching it, we've determined that this law is not retroactive, that it actually has an effective date. It doesn't apply backwards. And so if you were to take that 5.2 during the effective time of that 5.2, and you are also in compliance with Section C, meaning you're in compliance with all the other laws and stuff like that, and you give a notice, that was fine. So I suppose that's the purpose of B. Does that make sense, Board Member Connor, or is it additional questions?
I get what you're trying to do now. It just, it's fine.
I will also say that this is not a rush. Well, I think 611 is probably much more important than 610. We could bring 610 back if you needed, if you all felt that it would need to be clarified for the public's understanding. But that was the purpose behind that change.
So I'm just going to repeat what I think I understand. If a property owner served a rent increase before September 1st of 2022, that was 5.2%, that rent increase is going to still be valid. But if they've served a rent increase that had that 5.2% number, September 1st or later, that increase is going to be ineffective because of Measure P.
So, sorry, Charles, can I answer that?
Yeah, of course.
So I'm sorry, can you just repeat it one more time, Board Member Connor?
If I serve a rent increase for 5.2%, no later than August 31st of 2022, I get the full 5.2%. If that rent increase notice is served September 1 or later, then I have to roll it back to 3%.
Yeah, so first of all, what General Counsel Oshanuga was clarifying is that, this measure is not retroactive because the language in the measure doesn't have any, express, direction as far as what to do prior to the effective date of the measure. And so essentially what that means is anything that happened prior to December 30th, 2022, including them charging the 5.2% for all those months up to that point, which is September, October, November, December, there's no overcharge, there's no risk, there's no issue. However, after the effective date, essentially landlords are required to roll back the 5.2 down to 3. And so after that point, which, in practical terms, essentially means January rent, that has to be lowered somewhat to reflect the 3% change.
So much more clear. Thank you.
I saw that Mr. Vasilis had his hand up.
I think everything was clarified. Because you couldn't
Okay.
raise your rent 5.2% until September anyway. So all this is saying is that from September, when you were able to do that until the time in which Measure P was voted in, that was you're legally allowed to have the 5.2%, but then after December 30th, you're no longer allowed the 5.2, it has to go back down to 3.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Well, 3 or 60%.
No, it's 3 for the next year, this year.
Right.
Okay, all right.
After the phase-in period, that's when it will return to the calculation of either 60% of CPI or 3%, flat 3%, whichever is lower. But just currently for this phase-in
Period.
period, just
Mhm.
3%.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. All right, any other comments? I'm not seeing any unless I'm missing somebody. All right. In that case, I would need a motion, please.
So I move that we amend regulation 600 and 610 and add regulation 611.
All right. Mr. Oshanuga, does she need to add anything else to that, or is that sufficient for the motion?
That's sufficient. That's sufficient.
Okay, that was my feeling, but I thought I better check. All right, in that case, may I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Ms. Mishek. May I have a vote, please?
Yes, Board Member Connor,
Yes.
Board Member Johnson,
Yes.
Board Member Vasilis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mishek,
Yes.
and Chair Finley.
Yes,
Motion passes. Item G1, motion passes unanimous.
thank you.
The next item on the agenda is reports of officers.
Chair Finley and members of the rent board. The only thing I'm going to be reporting today is notice of our upcoming workshop on owner move-in evictions. This is an important workshop. It'll be both in English and Spanish to look into the process of an owner move-in eviction and the rules around it. And this is particularly important considering the fact that the eviction moratoria or the eviction moratorium for Richmond will be ending soon. And it's already ended in terms of owner movement. That's it.
I have a report to give. It's really a scheduling report. As you all know, our next meeting, I think it's March 15th, a month from now, we're going to be in person. The city, we're continuing to work with the city to figure out how they want us to do it in a very safe way. So, you know, you're probably going to receive updates in the coming weeks regarding that. Your terms are expiring. Some of you are applying, some of you aren't. And I just thank you for all your service, and I'll repeat that next month as well. But what's important here is next month is your last obligated meeting to attend. And for scheduling purposes, we're going to have 2 appeals on that month, just an FYI. And that's all.
A question, Mr. Oshanuga, thank you for mentioning that. So it is imperative, of course, that if you're not going to serve, then that we have the time from the city manager's office to find people who will be replacing you. Hopefully, the majority of you will stay. That's you bring the knowledge that we need to function efficiently as a board. I guess I know that there are some requirements in terms of our serving on the board with 2 appeals in front of us. Are you trying to get those done before we leave or after we leave?
Ideally, it would be while you all are serving on the board. These 2 particular, I can't get into the details because it's not agendized, but these parties have been waiting for a while. And if some of you return or some of you don't, we have to train up the new board and get them up to speed before hearing an appeal. So we may delay their appeal another month, and I'd rather not do that. And you mentioned, and I should mention, I'll get into more detail next meeting because again, it's not on the agenda, but there is a regulation that permits any board member to continue to serve beyond the expiration of their term until they get the replacement. It's not a mandate, you don't have to do it, but some of the prior board members have done it until the replacement came. So this.
Well, and again, so not only would you be getting in, whether you continue to serve, you still have to refile all your paperwork Whether you choose not to, then they will, I suspect, ask if you would like to continue to serve until your replacement is found. So there is that extension. But it's a little worrisome actually trying to hear the two appeals while not knowing what's happening with our board. So as you can, as quickly as you can, it would be greatly appreciated by all concerned. Anything else?
I have a question, Chair Finley.
Yes.
We are definitely in person next month? Because I haven't seen that email.
That, so, I can never say 100%, but the way it looks, it looks like we're going to be in person. I mean, barring some kind of a new emergency or renewal of the same emergency, we're going to be in person. You should all likely be receiving an email March 1st. That's when we will know 100%, March 1st.
And at this point, that's my understanding as well. That's what they're trying to. The good thing is that we wouldn't come online until the 15th or thereabouts, whereas the city council and many of the other boards will have already worked out the bugs in the system of coming back online into, of course, and also then we are simply we're not televised. We're simply for the radio portion of our meetings being available to the public. So I don't know how that's going to play out either. Time will tell.
I believe we may return to how we were before, those who remember. But you will receive an email with instructions as a refresher, because I know we all forgot a lot of things. So you will receive an email with refresher, and for the new ones, you'll receive instructions.
And I suspect you may have missed it somehow, Ms. Connor, because I know that the city clerk's office has put out the newest information. I think we received that during this past week. So
yeah, I did get an email saying that it was going to end on the 28th of February, but it wasn't explicit. That
it wasn't
we
explicit.
actually,
it was more information to come as they figure it out.
Exactly. They're sending the emails. They're doing their job. I appreciate that. It's just the way Mr. Oceanuga said it was like it was a foregone conclusion. So
well, it's looking like that. So we're trying to get prepared now. So we're working on it right now as we speak. So trust me, you're new and I have to remember how to do everything.
Are we at the point now where I can actually adjourn this meeting?
Yes,
anybody else? All righty. This session of the Richmond Rent Board is adjourned at 5:48 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Take care.